Cooper gets to the Carrie Page house. It's number 1516. There's a number 6 pole and there's pulsing electricity, and we hear it. Then he gets up to the doorway of the house, the doorway potentially another threshold. That number 6 pole, just like possibly the white horse or just like possibly the Judy name, maybe these are real things in the dreamer's world that have made their way into various iterations of the Twin Peaks show. Who knows? He mentions the name of her parents, and when he gets to Sarah, obviously she kind of stutters, Sister Sarah, and she's like, "What's going on?" And you could see some sort of shifting happening inside her.
If we look around the stuff that is occurring, first and foremost, the way that Carrie Page is presented to us is a ta-da. Very much so. That's the way it's presented to us, right? This is the thing. When I first started to look at it, I'm thinking to myself, Carrie Page has a backstory. Carrie Page knows who Carrie Page is. Carrie Page has a life that's lived. How do we know that? People are trying to get in touch with Carrie Page. There's a dead guy on the couch. That actor was told that he'd been there for 3 days. Why is that important? Because that would exceed the amount of time that at least we're shown that all of this took to occur. So if that's true, Carrie Page has been around a while. Not to mention, Carrie Page has a set of circumstances in her life that has brought her to a point where she needs to get the hell out of Dodge. See, I think what's happening with Carrie Page, Anthony, is that this is the truer iteration of the dreamer. And this is the effects of not confronting oneself early on. She probably didn't have access to ways to confront this stuff. And so she played out a cyclical trauma like was inflicted upon her. It's probably, it's not even really much of a guess, that she associated pain and love, and that put her in some fairly bad situations. If you don't believe me, ask the guy on the couch, right? We also kind of see evidence of what? Domestic abuse, right? There's like holes in the walls and stuff. So we are like, there's something about the window, right? Like the window's taken off, like maybe the guy tried to break back in. Like they've had fights, they've had skirmishes in the past, right? Whatever it was, she was apparently irritated. I'm going to assume that she's the one that killed this guy, being that she's still there and not freaked out and ran away and didn't call any cops about it, right? So I'm going to assume, being that she knows that that guy has been there, and she doesn't want to be gotten a hold of, she's the one who did it.
They get in the car. It's nighttime. She says, as she appears to be starting to fall asleep, but she's not falling asleep. She says, I tried to keep a clean house, tried to keep everything organized. It's a long way. Those days, I was too young to know any better.
When you listen to that scene, you just recently watched it. You don't know much about her, and what she really says doesn't really fill out, you don't get to know much. She's having sparse thoughts, right? Like somebody who is exhausted.
Yeah.
That's true.
It's also evoking, it's evoking Laura Palmer in very big ways.
It is.
You're looking for that as a viewer. You're waiting for some sort of awakening.
But being that at no point does she go, matter of fact, back when I was Laura Palmer, right? So I think what's most important about that, sometimes it's overlooked, is it's a very simple device. It just goes, I've lived an entire life.
Mm-hmm.
Carrie Page has lived an entire life, right? I think that's what it's supposed to be telling you. It's a tough life. It's a bad life. It's a life that, of what I'm saying, it's a life full of trauma. It's a cycle, clearly, but it's a, that's what it's getting at, right? So just in case you think this person just showed up and they don't have any, like, no, we're going to reinforce this to you. No, this person lived a whole life. Carrie Page's life.
Yeah, or Laura Palmer's, or that's...
No. This is Carrie Page telling you about Carrie Page's life that she believes actually happened. Now,
I understand, but everyone watching that for the first time is assuming this is some version of Laura Palmer. So is assuming that this is a dissociated person, or not everyone, but this is Laura Palmer with a different name, with a different outcome.
But then we see in multiple ways that it's not. All the way from the people that had the house that she supposedly lived at, and on and so forth. So what's the purpose of that? The purpose of that is is that the dreamer is not Laura Palmer. The dreamer has created iterations of herself to deal with things that happen to herself. But the real dreamer has a real life. And that life shares certain very sad elements with the thing that she constructed so that she could put herself not necessarily on trial, but she could definitely litigate the situation. And that's all part of the psychological drama that reaches self, right? Because all indication says none of this is true until all time folds on itself.
We get to Twin Peaks. It is not a ghost town, as far as I can tell. It's just nighttime, but there are absolutely businesses that are still open. It doesn't look like the beginning of The Leftovers, where all of a sudden people have just vanished. We get to the 708 house, the classic Palmer household. They go up the stairs together. There's some great acting. We meet Mary Reber's character, who identifies herself as Alice Tremond. She says they bought the house from a Chalfant, a Mrs. Chalfant. We get the name of the episode as Cooper utters to her, "What is your name?" He identifies himself by the Cooper name as an FBI agent. That conversation ends with really no satisfaction. They're back in the street. Cooper has this moment where he's looking toward the house, starts to take a step or so, leaning forward. Some people think there's that clicking sound again. I'm not sold on that necessarily. Maybe he leans forward and he does something with his arm, and he's utterly confused, it appears, and he says, "What year is this?" That line really seems to trigger a total change in the Carrie Page's character's demeanor. And then we get the voice of Sarah Palmer yelling at her name, the scream, the power surges and then goes out. And then we get a shot in the red room in slow motion of Cooper and Laura Palmer, her whispering into his ear. And that's it.
Man, I think for the purposes of this, let's call this a dream. No, I don't think it's really a dream. I think it's a disassociation, but easy enough. We understand dream logic. I think that in and of this dream, what's essentially happening is these are more clear estimations of what Carrie Page's life really looks like. And then suddenly she's confronted with this autonomous thing that has been constructed that plays in her subconscious. That cannot be real. And if in fact that is real, then everything that's around her is pretend. The knowledge of that's the acceptance of the repression that you threw away, right? That's all of that would flood in, right? This is the place where my suppression exists. This is the place that holds me back. This is the identity that I've killed and needs to fall away. I've taken the journey, I've crossed the threshold. Now all this goes to die. And what literally happens, my man? What literally happens? Everything goes black. It's gone. Everything goes, it's gone now. To me, that feels sort of like awakening. When they say, we showed you the ending, right? Like it reached the ending. Again, it's one of those things where it's like, we can all come up with an answer like, what the hell do you mean about that? But it actually satisfies this entire theory of everything if, in fact, that's the moment where this person reaches self. If this Jungian...
Now, if you look at it from the inside, then it is just so as if you would observe the world. When you observe the world, you see people, you see houses, you see the sky, you see tangible objects. But when you observe yourself within, you see growing images, a world of images, generally known as fantasies. Yet these fantasies are facts. These houses were all fantasies. Everything you do here, all of the houses, everything was fantasy to begin with. And the fantasy has a proper reality. That is not to be forgotten. Fantasy is not nothing. It is, of course, not a tangible object, but it is a fact nevertheless. It is a form of energy. despite the fact we can't measure it. It is a manifestation of something. And that is a reality that is just a reality as, for instance, the peace treaty or Versailles or something like that. It is normal, you can't show it. But it has been a fact. And so the psychical events are facts, are realities. And when you observe the stream of images within, you observe an aspect of the world within. Because the psyche, you know, if you understand it as a phenomenon that takes place in so-called living bodies, then it is a quality of matter. As our body consists of matter, we discovered that this matter has another aspect, namely a psychic aspect. So it is simply the world from within, seen from within. It is just as if we were seeing into another aspect of matter.
This self-described Jungian sat down and wrote a story to track Jungian thoughts and show you the personal unconscious. Then what's the point of that? It's always to reach self. He's got to show you how to reach self. That's what he's doing. He's got to show you how to reach self. What happens when you reach self? This thing falls away. And what happens to the archetypes? We'll get there next. But it's one of the more plausible explanations that tracks all the way through. So you've reached a different purpose now. Because otherwise it looks like it's a nightmare. It doesn't look like it's a ending. It looks like it's a brand new chaos. So in order for it to be an ending, it has to be the total destruction of that personal unconscious drama. It no longer serves a function.
And everything goes away, including the Mary Reber character, who archetypically would be serving what function, or maybe representing which element.
Well, that is one point where I think meta actually does come into it. But it does serve a purpose for like the narrative of Twin Peaks and even the narrative that we're attempting to track over the top of it. But it is a meta moment that happens on purpose. And here's the point of that. The point of that is the Palmers never lived there. Right? That's the point. Like in what you're seeing in this world where Odessa exists, perhaps Carrie Page has never actually seen that house, but she's seen it in her subpsyche, so now she can reconstruct it for the purpose of this demonstration, which is to face off against these things in her subpsyche and then reach the next plateau, the actual waking self. A good way to go about doing that would be to sort of throw you like a meta bone, where you go like, look, the person that really lives there is going to tell you that those people never lived there and is going to give you the chronological history. And then you listen, you go, I know those names. That's because you're still in that world that's permeated by both of these things now. She's got to confront that other thing. Isn't that the point of what he's doing? Cooper's bringing her there, whether he knows it or not. He just knows that I think he just knows that it's important, right? That's what I assume. I mean, he says that there's not time to tell her about the whole thing, but I think he means the events that led him there, rather than like actually having the knowledge of here's the exact plan. And here's the fireman's exact point. I know everything he wanted me to do. I don't think that he knows that. But I think that the point of bringing her there is so that she can confront that which is true about her life and that which is not true, this false identity that has to die away in order to become the self that you're supposed to be, or a better self, the transformation that Jung is on about. The whole point of individuation, the whole idea of reaching self. That's his whole deal, right?
We get blackness, and then we get somebody's view in slow motion of Cooper and Laura from a scene earlier in this episode, I believe, when she's whispering into his ear, and it's like just super slow motion with dark space low playing over
so like
the top.
We talked about before.
Whose view is that? Because that wouldn't be Carrie Page the dreamer's view, would it?
Well, sure it would be, because here's what's strange. So if you went through the entire Jungian process, right? Let's say you devoted 6 months, you went to a clinical psychologist that could still say that they practice Jungianism aloud without being laughed out of like a real office. The idea would be so that at the other end you would go, and I have reached the moment of self. And the very next second, that new piece of information that was told to you, the new thing you saw on the newsstand, whatever the case might be, it's something you add to the grand collection of self. Because so how could you ever be done with individuation? As long as you're alive, how could you ever actually be done? So your archetypes live to tell the tale again, right? Not the archetype, the one that you just used for the personal unconscious drama that you went through this entire process to reach this new understanding of yourself, but the archetypes in their formless form or their representative form. So that goes back to what we were talking about before, where I said, this moment seems to occur, and then when they're necessary, they seem to deploy. Perhaps that they're done and they go back into that moment forever. Perhaps will not be the face of Agent Cooper the next time that a need for self-defense kicks in. Maybe Carrie Page is at a point in her life, though, Anthony, in her external life, where she has enough of her shadow, she has enough of her self-defense mechanism, she has enough of these things, right? Where she won't need that archetype to be the thing that gives her the next message next time, whether she sees it or doesn't, the thing that plays out in the back of her mind. Perhaps it's not self-defense that she needs. Perhaps that stays locked away until she needs it again. Apparently what she really needed, right, was to face off against the shadow, because the shadow took over her life. So again, what does that look like for us? What that looks like for us in the external world is that we're doing that shit you know you shouldn't do. You're letting your bad habits run amok. And if you let them run amok deep enough, they can really, really hurt you. You need some of it. You need to be confrontational when it's important. You need to defend yourself when it's important. But you cannot live your life under the auspices of, I'm always right, you're always wrong, whatever. Or I can't learn. There's nothing to be obtained, right? So you can't be self-defense always. You can't be shadow always. But you can't be none of those things either. It's weird about that moment. That not just in the series, but in Twin Peaks in general.